His car broke down on Highway 1, so somehow the universe decided to shove us together in one tiny car. He color codes his entire life. I can't even find my sunglasses half the time. We weren't meant to click, but the road had other plans. The sun was just beginning to melt into the horizon when I started the drive down Highway 1, my playlist humming through the old speakers and my hair tangling in the ocean wind drifting through the open window. That stretch of road always felt like freedom to me, like the world was wide enough to hold every mistake I ever made, every dream I hadn't chased yet, and every version of myself I was still becoming. I wasn't running away from anything exactly, but maybe I was moving towards something, even if I didn't know what yet. The sky was drenched in soft gold, the kind that makes your chest feel too full and too empty at the same time. I didn't have a plan, which was the best part of the whole trip. No schedule, no destination, just miles in the Pacific beside me, whispering its own kind of music. I was halfway through a long curve along the cliffs when I saw him for the first time. A guy in a shirt that looked way too formal for this coastline standing beside a sleek little car with its hood up his hands on his hips, and frustration basically radiating off him like heat. He looked so out of place in the way a perfectly folded map would look tossed into the sand. At first I told myself to keep driving because that was easier. It was simpler to stay in my lane, literally and metaphorically, but something about the way he stared at the engine, like it personally offended his entire life, made me slow down. I pulled up beside him, letting the engine of my car rumble to a stop as my music faded into the background. He turned slowly, as if bracing himself for judgment, which honestly made me smile. His hair was neat but slightly wind-messy, and he had this clean, focused look in his eyes like someone who lived by checklists and punctuality. "You good?" I asked, leaning slightly out the window. He exhaled in a way that suggested the answer was absolutely not. "My car just died," he said calmly but with an edge that said he didn't like not being in control. "And I can't get it to start again. I've already called a tow truck, but they said they'll take at least 2 hours." 2 hours on Highway 1 with the ocean chill creeping in and the sun sinking fast. I glanced at the small backpack at his feet, and then at his shoes, which were definitely not beach-approved. He looked like the type who never planned for things like this, which honestly made me feel a little protective. "Want a ride?" I asked before I could overthink it. He straightened, clearly surprised. "Are you sure?" I shrugged lightly. "I mean, you look harmless enough, and I'm heading south anyway." He blinked, then nodded with a mixture of relief and hesitation. He grabbed his bag, walked over to the passenger side, and paused before opening the door. "I'm Ethan, by the way." "Luna," I said, smiling as he climbed in. He shut the door, and the scent of books and lemon soap filled the space between us, blending strangely well with salt air and sun-warmed leather. And just like that, the road trip I never planned for suddenly felt like it was beginning all over again. Would you have picked up a stranded stranger on Highway 1? Ethan settled into the seat like he wasn't entirely sure it was safe to relax, which honestly made me bite back a smile. He placed his backpack neatly at his feet, then buckled his seatbelt with the seriousness of someone boarding a rocket ship instead of my forever dusty road trip car. The way he held himself made the air feel a little tighter, a little more careful, which contrasted so much with the open windows and tangled breeze that it almost felt like two different worlds touching for the first time. I eased back onto the highway, letting the wind push inside again, lifting my hair and causing the corners of a map on the dashboard to flutter. Ethan glanced at it then, at me, his brows lifting like he suspected something. "You're driving without GPS," he said in a tone that suggested this was equal parts surprising and mildly terrifying. I laughed softly. "Yeah, I like getting a little lost. Makes things interesting." He blinked slowly, like he was recalibrating his entire belief system. "I plan every route before I leave home. Backup route too, and printed directions just in case." Of course he did. I could practically see the color coding in his brain. "So what about you?" I asked. "Heading somewhere important?" His shoulders tightened just a little. "I was on my way to a study retreat, bar exam prep. It's a lot, and I'm already behind schedule now." The way he said it told me everything. He carried the weight of expectations not just from himself, but maybe from family mentors, professors, all stacked neatly like the notes in his bag. Maybe being off schedule isn't the worst thing. I said, gently letting the ocean breeze carry the words. Sometimes the detours end up being the best parts. He didn't respond, but I saw his fingers relax slightly on his knee like the thought had cracked through his stress just a bit. We curved along the cliff edge where the coastline stretched endlessly glowing under the last strips of sun. The sky was doing that watercolor thing, soft blues melting into oranges and pinks. I heard him exhale slowly, like the view pulled something loose in him. "It's really beautiful," he murmured almost to himself. I smiled because people always said that the first time the coast softened them. It always is. Makes everything else feel less loud. He looked at me, then a quick glance but warmer than before. "You come out here a lot?" "Whenever I need to breathe," I answered. "Or when life stops making sense." He nodded slowly. "So, often?" I laughed. "Yeah, pretty often." We hit a stretch of road where the wind picked up, carrying the salty scent of the ocean stronger than before. My hair whipped lightly across my face, and I let it because that was part of the freedom, the kind he probably never let himself enjoy. He watched the waves for a long moment, then said quietly, "Thanks for stopping. Most people wouldn't." "Most people don't see what I see," I replied without thinking. He turned his head toward me, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "What do you see?" I glanced at him, meeting his gaze for the first steady moment we'd shared. "A guy who could use a sunset," I said softly. His breath hitched just slightly like he wasn't used to being read so easily. And for the first time since he stepped into my car, the tension in his shoulders eased, replaced by something soft, something beginning, something neither of us were ready to name yet. Who do you think is more nervous right now? The farther we drove, the more the road seemed to stretch open ahead of us, wide and glowing, like the world was inviting us somewhere neither of us expected to go. Ethan sat a little straighter now, less rigid, more curious, his eyes following every curve of the coastline like he was trying to memorize it all. I could almost see his thoughts shifting, loosening, softening with each mile. He kept glancing at my dashboard, which was honestly a small, chaotic universe. Maps, receipts, seashells, and a pair of sunglasses I kept losing and finding again. After the third glance, he finally spoke. You really don't organize anything in here, do you? I laughed because he sounded half confused, half horrified. Not really. I know where everything is, though, sort of. He picked up a tiny seashell near his seat, turning it carefully in his fingers like it was fragile art. Do you collect these? Only from places that feel like something, I said. Moments I want to hold. He looked at me in that quiet, analytical way like he was trying to understand a language he'd never learned. And this one? That one was the first day I realized I wasn't stuck anymore, I said softly, more honest than I planned. Found it after a hard night. It reminded me the world keeps making new things even when you feel broken. He fell silent, not the awkward kind, but the thoughtful kind, the way people go quiet when something lands deeper than expected. He set the seashell down gently, like it meant something now that it had a story. I don't keep things like that, he said after a moment. Everything I own has a specific purpose, a reason. Maybe you just haven't found your seashell moment yet, I said. He almost smiled, and that tiny almost was enough to make something warm curl inside me. We passed a small turnout overlooking the cliffs, and I turned the wheel, suddenly pulling over. Wait, he said, bracing his hand on the dash. Are we stopping? Yep, I grinned, unbuckling. Come on, you can't just drive past views like this. He hesitated but followed me out of the car, the wind immediately tangling through our clothes and pulling the scent of salt and sun around us. The ocean below crashed against the rocks, powerful and rhythmic and endless. The sky was deepening into shades of tangerine and soft violet. He stood beside me, hands tucked into his pockets, tie slightly loosened by the breeze like the coast was undoing him thread by thread. Wow, he whispered. I've never seen anything like this. I watched the way the sunset reflected in his eyes, casting soft gold across the edges of his face. There was something vulnerable about him in that moment, something unguarded, something real. It hits different when you stop, I said quietly. He turned toward me, and for once he didn't look like the law student who planned everything, or the guy stressing about schedules. He looked like someone breathing for the first time in a long time. I didn't realize how much I needed this, he said. I did, I answered without looking away. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the waves below, and for a moment it felt like the world held its breath between us. His gaze lingered on me longer than before, softer, warmer, curious in a way that made my pulse flutter. Maybe he wasn't the only one who needed a detour. Which personality do you relate to more? We lingered at that cliff longer than either of us meant, to the air turning cooler, the sky melting into deeper shades as the sun slipped lower. Ethan kept looking out over the water like he was trying to understand something big and quiet inside himself. I didn't want to rush him, so I just stood close enough for our shoulders to almost touch, letting the breeze thread through my hair and tug softly at my clothes. After a while, he spoke without turning his head. Do you always do this? Do what? Pull over anywhere whenever you feel like it. Pretty much, I said, smiling. Life's too short to miss pretty things. He exhaled a soft laugh, almost disbelieving. I've spent years trying not to get distracted. I nudged him gently with my elbow. Maybe distraction isn't always a bad thing. He finally looked at me then, and there was something new in his eyes, something brighter, something that made warmth rise up my neck. We should get going, he said, but he didn't move. Yeah, I whispered, though I also didn't move. Eventually, we walked back to the car, and the moment hung between us, warm and unspoken, like the last glow of sunset trailing behind us. Once we were back on the road, the world felt softer, the wind brushing against us, warm and salty, filling the car with the scent of summer freedom and something beginning. Ethan rested his arm on the window, his posture looser than before. Every now and then he glanced my way with this small, quiet smile like he couldn't quite help it. You know, he said, I'm starting to understand why people like road trips. Oh, really? Yeah, he said slowly. You, the ocean, the unpredictability. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. I felt that more deeply than I expected, and it made my stomach flutter. We passed a stretch of beach where surfers were running, with boards into the waves, silhouettes glowing against the fading light. Children chased each other near the shoreline, their laughter rising in the breeze. It felt like the whole world was alive and moving and full of stories. You travel alone a lot? He asked suddenly. Yeah, I said softly. It's just easier sometimes. No one to disappoint, no one to explain things to. He was quiet for a moment. People don't always need explanations. Maybe, but most still ask for them. He looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen before. I won't. That simple promise sent a small shiver down my spine. We drove a little farther until the sky shifted into deep navy streaked with the first stars. I turned into a tiny seaside town, the kind where everything smelled like grilled fish and coconut sunscreen even at night. Why are we stopping? He asked. You'll see. I parked in front of a tiny shack lit by string lights, its sign reading Salt Whip Ice Cream in faded teal letters. He blinked. Ice cream? Exactly. The cure for existential crisis and broken cars. He shook his head, but he was smiling now, a real smile, warm and bright. Okay, convince me. Oh, I will. I hopped out and he followed, stepping into the glow of the string lights with the ocean murmuring gently behind us. I could already feel the next moment rushing toward us, warm, sweet, electric. Should she buy him a bold flavor or a safe flavor? Salt Whip ice cream smelled like vanilla sugar and beach air, the kind of scent that warms your chest before you even take a bite. The little shack had pastel stools and a window where a girl with sun-bleached hair leaned out, smiling like she already knew all our secrets. Ethan stood beside me, looking half amused, half bewildered, like he had never expected ice cream to be part of his day, or his life, or his fate. I tapped the menu board with my fingertip. All right, law boy, pick your poison. He crossed his arms thoughtfully, studying the list like it was a legal brief. Sea salt caramel swirl, lavender honey, midnight chocolate. You're analyzing ice cream, I whispered, laughing. He gave me a look that was half defensive, half adorable. I analyze everything. I shook my head, stepping closer. Not tonight. Tonight you choose with your heart. Something about those words made him go still for a tiny second, like he actually listened, like maybe his heart had something to say. Lavender honey, he said quietly. I blinked. Didn't expect that. Neither did I. I ordered mine 2 mango cream, which tasted like road trips and sunshine, and the feeling of being alive. We sat on the curb outside our knees, almost touching as we dug into our cones. Lights from the shack glowed soft gold against our faces, the night warmed, the ocean humming in the background like a lullaby. Ethan tasted his first and closed his eyes just a little. Okay, this is actually incredible. Told you. He took another bite slower, savoring it like he wanted to memorize the moment. I haven't had ice cream in ages. How does someone just not have ice cream? I don't know, he laughed. Life gets busy, structured, predictable. So you forgot joy? He looked at me, then really looked. Maybe. Something fluttered inside me again and I swallowed a spoonful of mango that was suddenly too warm on my tongue. We ate quietly for a minute, letting the night wrap around us gentle and shimmering. A group of teenagers biked by laughing. A couple walked past holding hands, shadows long on the pavement. Ethan's shoulders softened more with every passing moment, like little pieces of armor slipping off. He tilted his head. Do you do this often? Change people's days out of nowhere? No, I said softly, but yours felt like it needed changing. He held my gaze a beat longer than he should have. You might be right. My heart stuttered. He brushed a smudge of mango from my cheek with his thumb, without even thinking, and then froze when he realized what he'd done. Sorry, he murmured. I didn't move. It's okay. The night felt suddenly brighter, sharper, warmer. A light breeze swept through, carrying the scent of salt and something floral. Maybe his ice cream, maybe him. So, I said, trying to steady myself. Ready to keep going? He hesitated, then nodded slowly, his eyes still soft. Yeah, wherever you're headed, I guess. That sentence curled around me like a promise. We stood and walked back to the car, the world around us glowing like the start of something I wasn't brave enough to name yet. Was Ethan's choice of lavender honey a sign he's loosening up? The road welcomed us back with open arms stretching out dark and smooth beneath the stars. Ethan slid into the passenger seat with a different kind of ease now, like the ice cream had melted something inside him, something rigid and tired. I turned the engine on, and the headlights carved two soft tunnels of light across the pavement. The world felt spacious again, full of possibility. For a while we didn't talk. The quiet wasn't awkward, though it felt gentle like a blanket tucked around us. Wind rushed through the open windows, carrying the cool breath of the ocean and the faint scent of eucalyptus from the hills. My hair whipped around and Ethan laughed softly when a strand stuck to my lip. Here, he said, leaning over just enough to unstick it with his fingers. I almost forgot to breathe. Thanks, I whispered, gripping the wheel tighter. Anytime. He said it like he meant it. To keep my heart from sprinting out of my chest, I slid a hand toward the radio. Music filled the car, mellow guitar, soft vocals, the kind that sound like wandering barefoot at night. Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes. I can see why you like this. Like what? This feeling, this movement. No destination, just moments. I smiled at the road. It's addicting. He opened his eyes and looked at me for a long moment. I think I could get addicted too. My pulse fluttered. I didn't trust myself to answer. The world outside blurred into rolling hills and long lines of cliffs, the moon hanging low and round above the water. Highway 1 always felt like a dream. You could drive through a place where time lost urgency. Ethan pressed his palm against the open window, letting the wind glide through his fingers like he wanted to feel everything at once. You know, he said softly, I wasn't on my way anywhere fun. I glanced at him. Where were you headed? A study retreat. 3 days closed off in a cabin with textbooks, case files, outlines. Sounds suffocating. It was supposed to help me focus, but honestly, he paused, I think it was just another way to avoid living. I didn't expect that honesty, and it settled warm and heavy in my chest. So meeting me messed up your plan? I teased. He shook his head slowly. Maybe it fixed it. I felt that more than I should have. We drove past a turnout overlooking a long stretch of moonlit beach. It was almost empty except for a single campfire burning low near the sand. The glow flickered against the waves, making them shimmer silver. Let's stop, I said before thinking. Ethan blinked. Right now? Yes, right now, I laughed, pulling into the turnout. Come on, law boy. This is the kind of night you'll regret missing. He didn't argue this time. He just followed. We walked down the sandy path, the cold grains shifting under our feet, the sound of the ocean growing louder, more rhythmic, more alive. The breeze tugged at my clothes and the moon painted everything soft and glowing. When we reached the bottom, I spread my arms wide, taking in the wide sweep of beach. Ethan watched me with something warm in his eyes, something unguarded. You really are a storm, he said quietly. And you're not scared? He shook his head barely. No, not anymore. My heart flipped. Is Ethan slowly falling for the freedom she represents? The beach stretched wide and silver under the moonlight, the waves rolling in slow and steady like they were breathing with us. Ethan stood beside me, his shoes dangling from one hand, his hair ruffled by the wind, his usual polished look replaced by something softer, freer, almost undone. I liked this version of him more than I should. We walked closer to the water, where the foam curled around our ankles, cool and fizzy. The ocean sounded like whispering secrets, pulling us in, then letting us go. Ethan looked down at his feet, sinking into the wet sand, and laughed under his breath. I can't remember the last time I did this, he said. Touched water? I teased. Touched anything without thinking first. I smiled gently. How does thinking less feel? He paused as a small wave washed over his toes. Terrifying. Another moment passed and he added, but good. We kept walking, letting the tide nip at our feet, our shoulders brushing now and then, sending tiny sparks through me. Far behind us, the campfire flickered, but we didn't head toward it. The moment felt too intimate, too quiet to share with anyone else. Ethan turned his face toward the horizon, watching the waves glow pale blue where the moonlight hit. Do you ever wonder what your life would look like if you'd chosen differently? All the time, I said softly. But then I remind myself I'm here now. And here is good. Here is better than good, he murmured. I felt that line all the way down my spine. We stopped where the sand grew smoother, the water brushing our legs higher now, the night breeze carrying salt and warmth, and the faint scent of wildflowers from somewhere inland. The world around us felt huge and quiet at the same time. Ethan crouched down, picked up a small piece of sea glass, held it up to the moonlight. Look, it's perfect. I bent closer, our faces almost touching, our breaths mingling in the cool air. The sea glass glowed soft green between his fingers. You can keep it, I whispered. Why? So you don't forget tonight. He closed his fingers around it slowly. I won't. Something about the way he said that made my chest ache in a good way. The waves rolled higher, and I splashed a bit of water at him without thinking. A tiny, playful flick. He blinked down at his damp shirt. Did you just... I splashed him again. His jaw dropped. Then he grinned and flicked water back at me. Soon we were both laughing, running along the shoreline, the water chasing our ankles, the night echoing with our voices. I felt young and wild and full of light, like the version of me I loved most. Ethan laughed freely for the first time since I met him, and it was beautiful. Eventually we slowed. Breathless, our clothes, damp, our hair messy, the moon shining bright above us. Ethan stepped closer, his chest still rising fast, his eyes soft with something that made my heart thrum wildly. I don't know what you're doing to me, he said quietly. Nothing, I whispered. You're just remembering who you are. His gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes, searching, hesitating, wanting. The world held its breath. So did I. Should he kiss her now, or wait for a later moment? The moment stretched thin between us like a single glowing thread pulled tight by the wind. The waves, the moon, the quiet ache in both our chests. Ethan stood so close I could feel the warmth of him easing into my skin, even though the night air was cool and damp. His breath brushed my cheek softly, carrying a hint of lavender honey ice cream, and something warm and nervous and new. He didn't move closer, but he didn't move away either. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to read something hidden, something fragile, something I hadn't meant to show. I felt my pulse racing in my neck and my fingertips everywhere. Ethan, I whispered, barely a sound. He blinked slowly like he was waking from a dream. Should I? You should do whatever feels real, I breathed. He exhaled shakily and the thread between us tightened, glowed, almost snapped. But instead of closing the space, he stepped back just half an inch, his gaze soft, full of apology and wanting and restraint. Not yet, he said quietly. A flicker of disappointment hit me, but then something warmer rose behind it. Respect, trust, something deeper. Okay, I whispered. Not yet. He smiled gently like I'd just taken a weight off him. The moment didn't break, though. It just shifted, turned softer, deeper, more promising. The waves rolled in closer, the foam catching the hem of my shorts, the wind brushing hair across my face. Ethan reached out slowly, carefully, then tucked the strand behind my ear like it was the most natural thing in the world. His fingers lingered for a heartbeat. Come on, he said softly. Let's walk. We moved along the shoreline side by side, the moon guiding us, the surf humming low and steady. Our hands kept brushing, until finally one brush lasted a little too long and neither of us pulled away. His fingers grazed mine again, slow, like he was asking a question without speaking. I let my hand slip into his. His breath caught. Our fingers threaded together, warm and certain and perfect, like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. We walked in silence, the good kind, the kind that says more than words ever could. The wet sand squished under our feet, cool and smooth. The ocean glow shimmered at our toes. The breeze swirled around us, wrapping us in salt and moonlight. I've never done this, he murmured. Holding hands, I teased lightly. He laughed quietly. No, I mean, letting myself feel something without fighting it. I squeezed his hand gently. How does it feel? Scary, he said. I smiled. And? He looked at me like I was the horizon itself, stretching wide and bright. Worth it. We reached a cluster of dark rocks where the tide pooled in little glassy puddles. Ethan crouched down again, brushing the surface with his fingertips, making tiny ripples dance. This is peaceful, he whispered. I didn't know I needed peaceful. You needed this whole night, I murmured. He stood and brushed the sand from his palms. I needed you. My heart stumbled so hard I almost tripped over the air. Before I could respond, a sudden loud crash sounded behind us, branches snapping, feet pounding the sand. Ethan pulled me behind him instinctively, his hand tightening around mine. What was that? He whispered. A shadow moved near the rocks. Is the shadow a person? An animal? Or something else? The shadow shifted again near the rocks, a low rustle breaking through the soft hush of the waves. Ethan's hand tightened around mine, pulling me just a little behind him, even though he was barefoot and breathless and not exactly built for danger. Something warm flickered in my chest at the instinct, the protectiveness, the way he stood barely in front of me like he wasn't letting anything touch me without going through him first. The rustle grew louder, then a small shape bolted out from behind the rocks, making both of us jump. Ethan stepped back so fast he nearly dragged me with him. A dog trotted into the moonlight, tail wagging like we were long-lost friends. A dog, Ethan breathed, pressing a hand to his chest. I thought we were about to die. I burst into laughter, the sound spilling out bright and wild across the night. You should see your face. He shook his head, but there was a smile tugging at his mouth, a soft, relieved one that made him look younger, lighter. The dog patted over, sniffing our feet before flopping right onto the sand, like it owned the beach. Hey, buddy, I murmured, kneeling beside it and scratching behind its ears. It closed its eyes, blissfully melting into the sand. Ethan crouched too, watching me for a moment, before reaching out to pet the dog as well. His fingers brushed mine lightly, sending a small, warm spark up my arm. Maybe it belongs to the people by the campfire, I said. Yeah, probably, but for a second I thought it was a coyote or something. Relax, lawboy, nature isn't out to get you. It feels like everything is out to get me. Not tonight, I whispered. He looked at me like he believed me. The dog eventually wandered off, heading toward the flickering campfire light. Ethan stood slowly, brushing sand from his legs, and offered me his hand without thinking. I took it without thinking either. We walked back toward the stretch of beach where the waves glowed pale and steady. His hand stayed in mine, warm, sure, comfortable, like it belonged there. Every step felt like it stitched us closer together, string by string, breath by breath. The night wrapped around us again, soft and calm, the scare already fading into something we would probably laugh about later. Ethan glanced at me sideways, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. You know, he said low, I wasn't afraid for me. My heartbeat stumbled. Oh? He nodded once. Yeah. The confession was quiet, but it echoed inside me loud. We reached a sloping patch of sand where the waves stopped just inches from our feet. I sat down, and Ethan followed, sinking into the sand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine lightly. The horizon stretched endlessly in front of us, the sky a deep velvet dotted with tiny stars. The ocean whispered and shimmered and breathed slowly like it was listening to us. Ethan leaned his elbows on his knees, looking out at the water. Can I tell you something? Always, I said without hesitation. He hesitated anyway, his jaw flexing a little. I feel different with you. Calmer, looser, like I'm not fighting myself every second. My chest tightened around something warm and dangerous. Maybe that's who you really are? He let out a soft breath. Maybe. Then he turned to me slowly like he couldn't help it. His voice dropped softer, warmer. And maybe I don't want this night to end. Should they stay on the beach longer or start heading back to the car? The ocean whispered over the sand, the moon hanging low and soft, like it was watching us, breathing with us, waiting for whatever came next. Ethan's words still lingered in the air between us, warm and trembling. I don't want this night to end. And something inside me softened, melted opened. I shifted a little closer, letting our shoulders press fully together, letting my thigh brush his just enough for him to feel it and know it wasn't an accident. His breath hitched the smallest sound, but enough to send a flutter rushing through me. We don't have to end it yet, I said quietly. Ethan turned his head toward me, slow, deliberate, almost reverent. If we stay here, I'm not sure I'll want to walk away at all. Maybe you're not supposed to, I whispered. The waves rolled in, gently brushing the sand near our feet like encouragement. The night felt thick with possibility, sweet and warm, like the air itself knew something important was unfolding. Ethan studied my face, his eyes tracing every line, every curve, like he was memorizing me in moonlight. I keep waiting to wake up, he murmured. This is real. I know, he said softly, and that scares me too. I reached for his hand, slowly letting my fingers glide over his knuckles before interlacing with his. His hand tightened around mine immediately, like he'd been waiting for that exact touch. Come here, I said gently. He swallowed, then shifted closer until our legs touched fully and his warmth seeped through me. I could feel the tension in him, the want, the restraint, the fear, the excitement all braided together inside him. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling his breath stutter again. His voice was barely a whisper. You're going to ruin me. No, I breathed. I'm going to wake you up. He turned his face slightly toward mine, his cheek brushing against my hair, the contact sending a warm shiver through me. Slowly, he lifted a hand, resting it against my jaw, his thumb grazing the corner of my mouth, soft and trembling. Earlier, he said quietly, I wasn't ready. And now, his thumb traced my cheek again, slower, deeper. Now I don't want to hold back anymore. The world felt suddenly too quiet, too still, like everything had leaned in, waiting. I tilted my face up toward him, and he leaned down just enough that his breath warmed my lips. We hovered there for a long suspended moment, the smallest space between us glowing like a live wire. Then Ethan whispered, tell me if I'm allowed. My heart flipped over itself. You are. He closed the last inch. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, warm, like he was learning me slowly, like he didn't want to break the moment, or me or himself. His fingers slid gently into my hair, his other hand tightening around mine. I kissed him back with the same slow tenderness, savoring the warmth, the trembling, the sweetness of him finally giving in. The waves washed over our feet and he deepened the kiss just a little, pulling me closer, whispering my name against my lips like he'd been holding it inside all night. When we finally pulled away, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine, smiling the softest, most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. I think I needed tonight more than I ever understood. I brushed my thumb across his cheek. You needed to feel alive. He breathed out slowly. And you made that happen. The night wrapped around us warm and endless, and the road stretched unknown ahead of us, glimmering like a promise. Do you want a bonus epilogue of what happens the next morning?